In this video, I'm going to be ranking all the weapons in Ark Survival Evolved, except for this time, I'm going to be ranking them differently. I'm just going to be ranking them purely on what their damage per second is. So, I've gone through all of the weapons using the training dummy to see what damage they do, and a lot of the weapons didn't actually work on the training dummy, so I had to do like an estimated number based on like the showing of the damage numbers. So those ones will have a little E next to them, meaning they're just estimates of mine, so they're not going to be exact, but they should be close enough for this video. So this one's basically just pure based on numbers, and it's going to just be have them ranked in that order. At last place, at number 43, is the electric prod, which has 0 damage per second. Yeah, I mean, this one's just used for doing like torpor, mainly to knock out players in PvP, so this one doesn't do much damage at all. And at number 42 is the lance, which does 1 damage per second, which is also not very good. This one's mainly just used for knocking players off their mounts, and I don't even think it's really meant to be used for that purpose. It's kind of just to mess around with, so this one also doesn't really do much damage. And number 41 is the club. This one does 10 damage per second, which is more than I thought, but still, this one's also just used for knocking things out. It's not really meant for damage. And at number 40 is the slingshot with 11 damage, and that's basically just if you pull it all the way back and shoot one rock, that's the most amount of damage it will do. And at 39 is the tech claws at the beginning. So basically, a lot of weapons in Ark, they basically like ramp up over time with damage, the claws being one of them. So how I'm going to rank these is I'm going to have them on the list twice. First off is the beginning, which I'll just have start, and then end will be how much damage they do once they're at their max capacity. So this is the beginning of the tech claws, and of course they're not very powerful when you first charge them up. Number 38 is the stone pick, which does 34 damage per second, which, I mean, I guess is just okay if you need to kill something in the early game. But after the stone pick is going to be the stone hatchet, which does 43 damage, which is quite a bit more. So if you're needing to kill something in the early game, definitely pick the hatchet over the pick. And number 36 is the bow and arrow, which does 46.75, which is just a little bit more than the hatchet. But of course, the main thing about this thing is it's ranged, so that's what makes it a lot better. And number 35 is the spear, which does 63 damage, so you can clearly do a lot more damage per second with the spear. It's just its melee weapon. And number 34 is the harpoon gun, which does 68 damage per second. It just does this with one shot, and it takes a while to reload, so you have to keep that in mind. And number 33 is the metal pick, which does 68 damage, so around the same damage, except for you can hit with this one faster if you're using melee. And at number 32 is the crossbow, which does 80 damage per second. Of course, this one also only gets one shot off, and then you have to reload it, and it takes a while, but 80 damage is still really good. And number 31 is actually the boomerang. Kind of crazy that one does more damage than the crossbow, but if you're basically throwing it as fast as you can at the ground at something, it does 81 damage per second. And number 30 is the metal hatchet, which does 85 damage per second, which is pretty good as well. I'm surprised the metal hatchet does that much compared to the crossbow and boomerang and all the other things. And number 29 is the flamethrower, which does around 90 damage per second. This is taking in that you're shooting it like the entire time with flames, as each time you shoot it with a flame it does like 2 damage, which adds up to like 10 per second, and then the flame itself does like 80 per second, so that adds up to about 90. And then number 28 is the pike, which does 107.1 damage per second. So the best of the melee tools so far. But actually after this is the sickle, which does the exact same damage at 107.1. And the reason I put it just one step higher is because you can actually hit a little bit faster with the sickle. I still probably am going to use the pike because, I mean, I can get like ascendant versions of it and stuff. I mean, I guess you can with the sickle too, but I don't know. It's kind of crazy that these both have the same damage per second. The sickle actually does quite a lot. And number 26 is the minigun, specifically the starting up of the minigun, which does around 115 damage per second. It takes a while to start it up, but then it does a lot more damage, which we'll get into later. And number 25 is the chainsaw, which does 130.9 damage per second. So quite a bit, no charge up or anything, you can just start slashing with this thing. And in number 24 is the simple pistol, which does around 140 damage per second, but it only has like 6 shots and it takes a little bit to reload. And after this is the fabricated pistol, which actually does the same amount of damage at 140 damage per second. Now this could vary just a little bit depending on how fast you can actually shoot the bullets out, but they seem to do the same damage. The fabricated pistol does a little bit less per bullet, but it can shoot just a little bit faster. Next is number 22 is the compound bow, which does 148.75 damage per second. The compound bow does quite a lot of damage just with one arrow. And at number 21 is actually the assault rifle at 192 damage per second. But I think the reason I and a lot of people don't use it in PvE anyway is just because of how much bullets you have to make for it. And at number 20 is the sword, which does 192.1 damage per second, which is way more than the pike. I would definitely recommend building a sword. I mean, as soon as you can, definitely way better than the pike in any situation, as well as it hits a lot faster. At number 19 is the long neck rifle with 196 damage per second, or just 196 damage per shot because it takes forever to reload, but it's kind of just like a one-shot rifle, so it makes sense. And at number 18 is the tech pistol, and specifically the start of it, which does 196 damage per second, which of course is an estimate. It's kind of hard to get the tech pistol readings, but I think that's pretty close to how much damage it actually does at the beginning, and it just shows how good it is because that's just the start of it, and it's already this high at number 18 within like the top 20 of the guns when it comes to damage, so I think that's pretty good. And number 17 is the tech claws, which is specifically the end of it once you have them fully charged up, and they do about 200 damage per second, which for them being like a tech items you have to get from distributing the master controller, and there being other tech weapons that deal more damage, I don't know if they're really worth making. And number 16 is the fabricated sniper rifle, which does about 230 damage per second. This is because it can get a few shots off within that second time frame, so it can deal quite a bit of damage. And number 15 is the minigun fully charged up, which does 276 damage per second, which that over multiple different seconds actually does quite a lot of damage, and it does have an overheat that it does, so that kind of messes with it, but it's still quite a bit of damage. And number 14 is the tech bow, just with the regular arrows that it has, and that does 310 damage per second. And this is kind of just an estimate of a bunch of different shots, because depending on how far you pull it back all the way and how long you wait, the more damage it will do. So this is just kind of in between all of those. Number 13 is actually the grenade, which surprised me, which does about 334 damage per second, which honestly isn't really that good for considering how expensive grenades are and how annoying they are to use. They're mainly used for destroying structures in PvP, so in PvE they're not as useful, which is kind of the perspective I'm coming at it from, but in PvP obviously they'd be more useful for structure damage. And then we have the cluster grenade, which does about like 400 something damage per second. So that's a little bit better, and of course that's not equating the other clusters that come out and shoot because they're way too far from the training dummy to actually like take part in the actual damage itself, so they'll definitely do a lot more damage, especially considering all of the area of effect they have. And number 11 is the tech sword, which does 428 damage per second, which is a ton. It's double the tech claws at their full capacity, so I would definitely say the tech sword is the best melee weapon to go for. And number 10 is the double barrel shotgun at 880 damage per second, which is just a lot of damage, and that's just from the 2 shots you can get off in the second, because you can just quickly fire 2 of them and deal a ton of damage. But in number 9 is actually the pump action shotgun with 960 damage per second. This one you can also get 2 shots off in a single second, but those 2 shots do a lot more damage. The thing is, the pellets individually do actually less damage than the double barrel shotgun, but they have more pellets in each shot. So I believe the double barrel shotgun, I counted, has about 10 pellets that actually hit within the shot, and the double barrel has 15. So the double barrel has more pellets that do less damage, but it adds up to more damage if you hit all of them. And number 8 is the tech bow with explosive arrows, which do about 900 damage per second, which is really great. Obviously, I mean, it makes sense. The tech bow is one of the very end game items, so it should do a lot of damage. And number 7 is the tech railgun, which does 935 damage. Now that sounds a lot compared to everything else on here, but it's honestly kind of underwhelming because you get 1 shot and the cooldown is absolutely ridiculous. You have to wait on this thing, especially compared to other tech items that are coming within this next like top 5 or so. It's kind of underwhelming compared to those tech items for how expensive it is to make anyway. At number 6 is the cruise missile, which does 1,284 damage per second, which is quite a lot for 1 shot, but you only get 1 shot with this thing and then it breaks and you have to build a new one. And also it's really hard to get because you have to defeat the master controller, and it's really expensive to make. And number 5 is actually the tech grenades. These things do 1,769 damage per hit or explosion or whatever, and you could throw multiple of these, but usually you can only get like 1 off per second, I would say. So this one actually does quite a bit of damage. But after that, we have the rocket launcher, which does 2,677 damage per second. So does a lot more than the cruise missile, which is kind of surprising considering this cruise missile is a tech item. But I guess it makes sense gameplay wise because that one's also the one you can control. But still, the rocket launcher does a ton more, and I think it's just the more practical one to use. And number 3 is the tech rifle, which does 3,213 damage per second, which is just absolutely ridiculous. You can shred through thousands of health within a matter of seconds. I mean, this thing is probably one of the best weapons in the game. And then number 2 is the tech pistol, fully charged up, which does 3,360 damage per second. It basically like ramps up damage over time, and then it has multiplier, which it goes up to 20x multiplier, which does about that much damage over 3,000, which is really good. And number 1 is the tech grenade launcher with the tech grenades inside of it, which has 3,538 damage per second. So this was quite a surprise to me. I wasn't expecting the tech grenade launcher to win. I thought like the tech rifle would win out of all of these, but this one came in first, and it does a ton of damage. I mean, it's just a few hundred over the tech rifle and tech pistol, so they're all really close, but with the tech grenades, you can get 2 tech grenades off at once, making it just extremely deadly. But that's going to be it for this video. If you guys did enjoy it, make sure to leave a like and also subscribe. Thanks for watching, and bye.